August 17, 1949. Mexico City's Templo Mayor excavation site. Dr. Eduardo Contreras drops his brush. His hands tremble as he clears away 5 centuries of packed earth. The skull stares back at him, small, elongated, unmistakably canine. But it's the position that freezes his blood. The dog's mouth is open in what appears to be a final, silent scream. Its paws are extended upward, as if trying to claw through solid stone. Then he sees another, and another. By sunset they've uncovered 47 skeletal remains, all positioned the same way, all showing signs of the same desperate struggle. The archaeologists' report would later note tooth marks on stone, worn claws, compressed chest cavities consistent with suffocation. These weren't ceremonial burials. These animals had been sealed alive in their master's tomb. But the truth was far more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. Before we uncover the truth about the emperor's Xoloitzcuintli dogs, 1502 hairless hounds guarded royal tomb, found buried alive with their master, make sure to subscribe to Fear Sermon and ring that notification bell. We're about to journey into one of the most disturbing funerary practices of the Aztec Empire. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. We love hearing from our community of mystery seekers around the world. The year is 1502. Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztec Empire, rises from Lake Texcoco like a jewel of impossible engineering. Its population exceeds 200,000 souls, larger than any European city of its time. The causeways stretch for miles, connecting the island city to the mainland. The Templo Mayor pyramid dominates the skyline, its twin temples dedicated to Tlaloc and Huitzilopochtli piercing the clouds. This is a civilization at its absolute zenith. The marketplaces overflow with goods from 1,000 conquered territories. Cacao beans serve as currency. Jade, turquoise, and obsidian gleam in the afternoon sun. The air smells of copal incense and maize tortillas cooking on clay griddles. Poetry competitions draw crowds in the hundreds. Engineers maintain an aqueduct system that would impress Roman architects, but beneath this grandeur lies a society bound by rigid spiritual obligations. Death is not an ending, it is a transformation, a journey into one of several afterlife realms depending on how one dies. Warriors who fall in battle ascend to the highest heaven, transforming into hummingbirds that drink from celestial flowers. Those who drown find paradise in Tlalocan, the realm of the rain god. Common citizens face a 4-year journey through the underworld of Mictlan, crossing rivers of blood and navigating between clashing mountains. And for this perilous journey, one needed guides. Enter the Xoloitzcuintli, the ancient hairless dogs of Mexico called Xolo for short. These weren't pets in the modern sense. To the Aztecs, they were sacred beings, living conduits between the mortal world and the realm of death. Their name derives from Xolotl, the dog-headed god of lightning and death, twin brother of Quetzalcoatl. According to mythology, Xolotl descended into the underworld and returned with the bones of the previous human race, which the gods ground into meal and mixed with divine blood to create humanity's current iteration. The Xoloitzcuintli served as Xolotl's earthly representatives. Their hairless bodies, warm to the touch, were believed to hold healing properties. Families kept them close to children and the elderly, believing their body heat could cure ailments from rheumatism to insomnia. Their loyalty was legendary. They would refuse food after their master's death, often dying within days of grief. But their most important role came after death. Aztec theology held that crossing the Chiconahuapan, the 9-fold river of the dead, required a canine guide. Only a Xolo could recognize its master's soul among the millions of shadows. Only a Xolo possessed the strength to carry that soul across raging spiritual waters. Without this guide, a soul would wander the shores of Mictlan for eternity, never finding rest, never reaching the final level where existence simply dissolved into peaceful nothing. For common citizens, a single dog might be sacrificed and buried with them. For warriors, perhaps 2 or 3. But for royalty, for those who commanded armies and communed with gods, the requirements were far more extensive. Something was about to happen in Tenochtitlan that would push this practice to its darkest extreme. Ahuitzotl, the 8th ruler of the Aztec Empire, lies dying in his palace chambers. He is 53 years old. His reign has been marked by unprecedented military expansion and architectural achievement. The current Templo Mayor stands as testament to his ambition. He expanded it to its greatest size, consecrating it with a ceremony that allegedly saw 20,000 captives sacrificed over 4 days. But a freak accident has sealed his fate. During the inauguration of a new aqueduct system, floodwaters burst through unexpected channels. The emperor struck his head on a stone lintel while fleeing. The wound festered. Now, 6 weeks later, infection has spread to his brain. As he drifts in and out of consciousness during the summer of 1502, his priests face an unprecedented theological dilemma. This is an emperor who has conquered 45 city-states, a ruler who has communed directly with Xoloitzcuintli, receiving visions that guided military campaigns, a man-god whose journey through Mictlan will be scrutinized by every supernatural force in the cosmos. How many guides does such a soul require? The high priest of Xoloitzcuintli, a man named Tlacalo, makes the calculation: 1 dog for each year of successful reign, 1 dog for each major battle victory, 1 dog for each significant temple construction, 1 dog for each. The number keeps growing. The theological mathematics become more complex. Consultations with codices stretch through the night. Star positions are charted. May's divination is performed. The final number shocks even the most hardened priests. 1502 Xoloitzcuintli dogs must accompany Xoloitzcuintli into death. Runners are immediately dispatched across the empire with an unprecedented order. July 12, 1502. The city-state of Xochimilco, 15 kilometers south of Tenochtitlan. A farmer named Chimali returns to his chinampas, the floating gardens that supply much of the empire's food, to find his property surrounded by imperial guards. His 3 Xoloitzcuintli dogs are gone. The soldiers leave a compensation of 50 cacao beans and a terse explanation, claimed for imperial funeral rites. Chimali's wife weeps. One of those dogs had belonged to her father, who died 3 years prior. They'd kept it as a living connection to his memory. The animal had slept on her father's mat, refusing to move for 6 months after his death. Now it was gone. Similar scenes unfold across the Valley of Mexico. In Texcoco, a noble family loses 8 prized breeding dogs. In Tlacopan, an elderly woman's companion of 14 years is taken from her arms. The imperial edict is absolute. Every Xolo within a 50-kilometer radius of Tenochtitlan belongs to the empire. But 50 kilometers isn't enough. By July 20th, the requisition expands to 75 kilometers. By July 28th, 100. Runners push into territories that have only recently submitted to Aztec rule. They enter villages with imperial authority, but the further they travel from the capital, the more resistance they encounter. In the mountain village of Xoloitzcuintli, an incident occurs that nearly triggers a rebellion. The local headman refuses to surrender his breeding population of 23 Xolos. These dogs are not tribute, he argues. They are spiritual guardians of our ancestors' graves. To remove them is to orphan the dead. The imperial representative, a military commander named Cuauhtemoc, faces a dilemma. His orders are explicit: obtain the dogs by any means necessary. But this village sits at a strategic mountain pass. A heavy-handed approach could spark an uprising that would require military resources better spent elsewhere. Cuauhtemoc negotiates. He promises that 5 dogs will be returned after the funeral ceremonies. He offers jade and obsidian. He invokes the glory of serving the emperor's eternal journey. The headman relents, but his final words chill the commander. You are orphaning the dead. The consequences will reach beyond this world. As August approaches, the collection effort grows desperate. They have gathered 1,247 dogs. They need 255 more. The imperial breeding program in Tenochtitlan is scoured. Puppies barely weaned from their mothers are taken. Dogs too old to walk are carried on litters. Even animals suffering from visible ailments, mange, broken legs, partial blindness, are accepted. A disturbing pattern emerges in the handwritten records preserved in the Codex Telleriano Remensis Lat, are translated by Spanish friars. Many of these dogs are arriving in states of extreme distress, separated from their families, transported in wicker cages, denied familiar food. They begin to show signs of psychological breakdown. One record describes a dog that has worn its teeth down to bloody nubs from biting at cage bars. Another entry mentions a female that has delivered premature puppies during transport, all stillborn. A third notes with clinical detachment, 23 animals have refused food for 6 consecutive days. Physical health deteriorating. Spiritual suitability remains viable. Because here's what makes this situation particularly disturbing. These dogs must arrive alive at the funeral. Dead animals cannot serve as guides through the underworld. The religious requirement is explicit. Each Xolo must be killed during the ceremony itself, their spirits released simultaneously with the emperor's, so they can find him in the chaos of the afterlife transition. August 9, 1502. Xoloitzcuintli dies at dawn. The imperial compound transforms into a meticulously choreographed dance of death preparation. The emperor's body is washed with sacred water from the spring of Chapultepec. His joints are bound in the fetal position, the posture of return symbolizing rebirth. He is dressed in 16 layers of fine cotton, each representing a level of the universe through which his soul must pass. His face is covered with a turquoise mask. A jade bead is placed in his mouth, payment for the underworld's crossing fees. Obsidian mirrors are positioned on his chest, tools for navigating the darkness of Mictlan. The body is then wrapped in a larger bundle, creating what the Aztecs called a sacred package. This bundle measures 3 meters in height and weighs more than 200 kilograms. Meanwhile, in a specially constructed compound adjacent to the Templo Mayor, 1502 Xoloitzcuintli dogs wait in an elaborate system of pens. The logistics are staggering. Each animal must be fed and watered. Waste must be managed. The noise, the barking, whining, and howling of 1502 distressed dogs echoes across the entire city. Residents later report that the sound kept them awake for 5 straight nights. Children have nightmares. Some families burn extra copal incense, praying for the souls of the animals they recognize, pets, and companions taken by imperial decree. The priests face a practical problem that borders on the absurd. How does one coordinate the simultaneous sacrifice of 1502 animals? The solution is as ingenious as it is horrifying. A system of ramps and channels is constructed leading from the dog compound directly into the pyramid's lower chambers. The dogs will be sent down these channels in groups of 20. At the bottom, priests stationed with obsidian blades will perform the killing stroke, a single cut across the throat, the same method used for human sacrifices. But there's a complication. The pyramid's internal chambers can only accommodate out 400 bodies at a time before they need to be arranged properly around the emperor's bundle. This means the slaughter must occur in waves, timed precisely to the chanting cycles of the funeral liturgy. Everything must be perfect. The emperor's soul cannot wait while priests struggle with logistics. Every dog must be dead and positioned before the final binding ceremony seals the tomb forever. August 14, 1502. The funeral begins at midnight. Torches illuminate the Templo Mayor's massive platform. 10,000 citizens gather in the plaza below. The ceremony is expected to last until dawn, approximately 5 hours to complete all required rituals. The first wave of dogs is released into the ramp system at 12:17 a.m. What happens next will be documented in fragments, pieces of testimony that Spanish chroniclers will record 40 years later when they interview elderly witnesses. These accounts vary in detail but agree on the essential horror. The dogs don't go quietly. If this story is giving you chills, hit that like button. It helps us bring you more forgotten chapters of history. Share this with someone who loves dark mysteries and archaeological discoveries. Let's discover what happens next in this unprecedented funeral ceremony. The archaeological discovery of August 17, 1949, would fundamentally challenge our understanding of Aztec funerary practices and reveal something far more disturbing than ritual sacrifice. Dr. Eduardo Contreras and his team from the National Institute of Anthropology and History had been excavating beneath the Templo Mayor ruins for 3 weeks. They'd found numerous offerings: jade figurines, obsidian knives, the skulls of sacrificed warriors. Standard archaeological fare for an Aztec pyramid. But Chamber 7 was different. The chamber measured approximately 40 meters square, unusually large for a pyramid burial space. Ground-penetrating radar had suggested significant organic material, which typically meant human remains or perhaps a cache of bones from sacrificial victims. When they breached the sealed entrance on that August morning, the smell hit them first. Even after 447 years, the confined space had preserved enough organic compounds to create a distinctive odor. One team member described it as ancient leather mixed with damp earth and something indefinably wrong. The lights revealed a nightmare made of bones. Canine skeletons filled the chamber from floor to ceiling in some places, but these weren't the neat, orderly arrangements typically found in ritual contexts. These bones told a story of chaos and terror. Dr. Contreras later testified to a Mexican congressional committee investigating the excavation. The positioning of the remains suggested extreme agitation during the dying process. Skulls were facing upward, always upward, toward where the ceiling would have been. Forepaws were extended as if climbing or scratching. Several skeletons were intertwined as though the animals had been climbing over each other. The team worked 12-hour days for 6 weeks, carefully documenting each skeleton's position before removal. They developed a 3-dimensional mapping system to preserve spatial relationships between bodies. What emerged was a reconstruction of the chamber's final moments. The dogs had been alive when the chamber was sealed. Evidence accumulated from multiple sources. The stone evidence, deep scratches covered every wall surface up to approximately 1 meter in height, consistent with dogs standing on hind legs, clawing at limestone. Laboratory analysis revealed these scratches contained calcium deposits from canine claws. Several walls showed gouges deep enough to have broken through the outer mortar layer. The skeletal evidence, 37% of recovered skulls showed worn-down teeth, the enamel ground away from biting at stone. 12 skeletons displayed fractured front leg bones consistent with repeated impact against hard surfaces. One skull had completely shattered teeth, suggesting the animal had bitten through its own jaw in desperation. The positioning evidence, the skeletons near the chamber's entrance were piled 3 and 4 deep, all facing the sealed doorway. The ones furthest from the entrance showed less signs of physical struggle, but displayed a different horror. They'd huddled together in groups, dying more slowly as oxygen depleted. The most disturbing evidence, in the chamber's northeast corner, they found what appeared to be a nursing mother with 4 puppies. The puppies' skeletons were positioned around the mother's ribcage, suggesting they died seeking warmth and comfort. The mother's skeleton faced outward, positioned protectively. Dr. Maria Salazar Torres, the forensic zoologist assigned to the excavation, wrote in her official report, "Based on chamber volume and estimated canine respiration rates, I calculate these animals survived between 4 and 8 hours after the chamber was sealed. Some of the smaller dogs, with lower oxygen requirements, may have survived up to 12 hours. They would have been conscious for most of this time." But the most chilling discovery came when they finally excavated beneath the dog skeletons to reach the emperor's burial bundle. The bundle itself was remarkably preserved. The outer cotton layers had degraded, but the inner wrappings remained largely intact. Standard procedure called for unwrapping such bundles on site to document any offerings or artifacts within the layers. As Dr. Contreras carefully removed the 7th layer of cotton, his blade struck something unexpected: more dog bones. Inside the emperor's burial bundle, they found an additional 47 Xoloitzcuintli skeletons. These dogs had been wrapped directly against the emperor's body, the first layer of his afterlife protection. Unlike the chamber dogs, these animals showed no signs of struggle. Their skeletons were arranged in neat spirals, their positioning peaceful. These 4 7 had been sacrificed before the wrapping, killed quickly, their bodies still warm when placed against their master. The implication was staggering. The priests had intended to kill all 1502 dogs in the traditional manner. But something had gone wrong. Excavation of adjacent chambers revealed fragments of the truth. In Chamber 8 they found a collapsed ramp system. The wooden supports had given way under the weight of too many dogs being channeled through too quickly. In Chamber 9 they discovered evidence of a fire. Burn marks on stone, charred wood fragments, and most tellingly the remains of 3 human skeletons in priestly regalia, apparently killed in a structural collapse. The funeral ceremony had descended into chaos. Modern analysis suggests what happened. The priests successfully sacrificed the first group, 47 dogs that were properly killed and arranged with the emperor's body. But when they attempted to accelerate the process to meet the dawn deadline, the logistics fell apart. Dogs panicked. Structures collapsed. The carefully choreographed ceremony became a desperate scramble. And at some point, someone made a terrible decision. Rather than delay the funeral or admit failure before 10,000 witnesses, they simply sealed the chamber with the emperor body and the remaining 1,455 dogs still alive inside. The hieroglyphic inscription found above the chamber entrance reads, "1502 guides accompany the emperor, all requirements fulfilled. The gods are satisfied." A lie carved in stone hiding one of history's most horrific mass entombments. The 1949 discovery triggered immediate controversy in both archaeological and political circles. The Mexican government, eager to promote national pride in pre-Columbian civilizations, found itself confronting evidence of an atrocity that complicated simple narratives of indigenous nobility. Dr. Contreras initially faced pressure to minimize certain findings. An internal memo from the Department of Public Education, declassified in 1987, explicitly requested that he emphasize the spiritual significance of the ritual while contextualizing any distressing elements within period-appropriate religious frameworks. He refused. His preliminary report, published in the Journal of Mexican Archaeology in March 1950, spared no detail. It included photographs of the scratched walls, diagrams showing the clustering patterns of skeletons near the sealed entrance, and forensic analysis of the prolonged suffocation process. The international response was swift and divided. European and American archaeologists praised the thorough documentation but questioned whether such practices revealed fundamental differences between Western and indigenous American civilizations. Mexican intellectuals pushed back against this framing, arguing it represented colonial thinking that judged indigenous peoples by foreign standards. The debate grew so heated that UNESCO convened a special ethics panel in 1951 to establish guidelines for reporting archaeological discoveries that might impact indigenous cultural heritage. The resulting document, the Geneva Protocol on Archaeological Sensitivity, still governs how such findings are presented today. But the more pressing question remained: was this an isolated incident, or did other sealed chambers contain similar horrors? Between 1950 and 1973, archaeological teams conducted extensive surveys of Aztec pyramid sites throughout central Mexico, using increasingly sophisticated ground-penetrating radar and eventually early CT scanning technology. They searched for similar chambers with high concentrations of small skeletal remains. They found 17 additional sites. Not all were identical to the Templo Mayor discovery. Some chambers contained far fewer animals, between 50 and 200. Others showed evidence of pre-sacrifice killing. The dogs had been dead before entombment. But 4 sites replicated the horror of Chamber 7. At Malinalco, a mountain fortress temple 90 kilometers southwest of Mexico City, excavators in 1957 found 327 Xoloskeletons in similar positions of desperate struggle. At Tlatelolco, Tenochtitlan's sister city, a 1962 dig uncovered evidence of 189 dogs entombed alive with a merchant prince. Each discovery added pieces to a disturbing pattern. The Codex Mendoza, a post-conquest document compiled in 1541, contains a passage that Spanish friars initially dismissed as indigenous exaggeration. It describes the howling pyramid nights when great lords died, during which the voices of 1,000 spirit dogs, crying to their masters, could be heard across the city. Elderly indigenous informants told the Spanish that these sounds came from dogs singing their death songs before joining the journey. In light of the archaeological evidence, this passage takes on new meaning. The howling pyramid nights weren't ceremonial theater. They were the actual sounds of hundreds of dogs suffocating in sealed chambers, their cries audible across the city through the pyramid's acoustic channels. Why would a civilization capable of sophisticated engineering, advanced mathematics, and complex theology commit such an act? Dr. Margaret Chen, a comparative religion professor at Stanford University, proposed a framework in her 1979 book Sacred Obligations and Systemic Cruelty that has since become the academic consensus. The Aztecs didn't see this as cruelty. They saw it as cosmic necessity. In their worldview, the universe operated on principles of reciprocal obligation. The gods had sacrificed themselves to create the sun and humanity. Humans reciprocated through blood offerings, their own and others. Everything in the cosmos existed in a web of debts and payments. A great lord's journey through Mictlan wasn't a personal spiritual experience. It was a cosmic event that affected the entire empire. If the emperor's soul became lost in the underworld, unable to complete the journey and dissolve properly, it could disrupt the entire cycle of death and rebirth. Crops might fail, wars might be lost, the sun itself might not rise. From this perspective, the suffering of 1,500 dogs was mathematically insignificant compared to the cosmic catastrophe their sacrifice prevented. The priests weren't being cruel. They were fulfilling an obligation so important that the method of fulfillment became secondary to ensuring completion. But this theological framing couldn't fully explain the deception. Why seal living dogs in the chamber and then lie about it in the hieroglyphic inscription? The answer appears in an unexpected source, testimony recorded during the Spanish Inquisition trials of 1548. An elderly former Aztec priest named Tezozomoc was being questioned about pagan practices he'd participated in before the conquest. During the interrogation, he described the funeral of a great lord, likely not a Huitzotl, but a similar ceremony from the 1510s, where the sacred dogs would not quiet themselves for the knife. the Spanish interrogator more interested in evidence of "to los solos olvidados," the forgotten Zolos. It displays several of the recovered skeletons alongside informational plaques explaining their historical and religious significance. Notably, it does not specify whether these particular dogs were sacrificed or entombed alive, a deliberate omission that reflects ongoing sensitivity about the details. But perhaps the most tangible aftermath of the discovery involves the Xoloitzcuintli breed itself. By the 1950s, Zolos had nearly vanished. Colonial Spanish authorities, viewing them as pagan symbols, had systematically killed the dogs wherever they found them. By the mid-20th century, fewer than 30 purebred Zolos were believed to exist. The 1949 discovery changed that trajectory. Suddenly, these ancient dogs represented a living connection to Mexico's pre-Columbian past. The Mexican Kennel Club launched a preservation effort, tracking down every surviving animal and establishing breeding programs. By 1960, the breed was designated a national treasure. Today, thousands of Xoloitzcuintli dogs live worldwide. Their numbers are stable. Many Mexican families keep them as companions, valuing their loyalty and gentle temperament. In an ironic twist, the publicity from the Templo Mayor excavation, the revelation of how 1,500 of these dogs died in darkness, may have saved their breed from extinction. The archaeological work itself continues. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted in 2018 identified 37 additional sealed chambers beneath various Aztec sites that remain unexcavated. Some likely contain similar scenes, others might reveal different practices entirely. The Mexican government has elected not to excavate these chambers. Official policy now favors preservation in situ, leaving archaeological sites undisturbed unless threatened by development or decay. This decision reflects both practical concerns about limited funding and ethical questions about disturbing burial sites. But archaeologists working on other aspects of the Templo Mayor complex occasionally find reminders of what lies beneath. During foundation work for a visitor center in 2003, construction workers broke through a limestone wall and discovered a small chamber containing 7 Zolo skeletons. Their positioning suggested they'd been carefully arranged after death, a proper sacrifice, done according to ritual requirements, which means that somewhere beneath the modern streets of Mexico City, sealed within pyramids that now serve as foundations for office buildings and apartments, hundreds more of these skeletons wait in the darkness. Some died quickly, their sacrifice performed with precision and religious care. Others died slowly, scratching at stone walls, howling for masters who could not hear them, suffocating together in chambers meant to preserve cosmic order. Both methods served the same theological purpose. Both sent souls into Mictlan with proper guidance. But only one left evidence that archaeologists can barely bry themselves to excavate. The Emperor's Xoloitzcuintli dog's discovery forced archaeologists, historians, and ethicists to confront uncomfortable questions about how we study and interpret ancient practices, questions that remain unresolved today. The first and most obvious implication concerns animal sacrifice in religious contexts. Every major civilization has practiced some form of animal sacrifice. Ancient Greeks, Romans, Hebrews, Egyptians, Chinese dynasties, and countless others killed animals for religious purposes. But the scale and method of the Aztec practice pushed into territory that even cultural relativists found difficult to contextualize. Dr. James Serpell, professor of animal ethics at the University of Pennsylvania, wrote in 1998, "We can acknowledge that these practices held deep spiritual meaning, while also recognizing that they caused immense suffering. The two facts don't cancel each other out. They exist simultaneously, and any honest historical analysis must hold both truths." This framework, holding multiple truths simultaneously, has become essential in modern archaeological interpretation. Students learning about Aztec civilization now encounter both the mathematical sophistication of their calendrical systems and the suffering inherent in their sacrificial practices. Neither fact erases the other. The discovery also revealed how theological certainty can override empathetic response. The priests who sealed those chambers weren't sadists. Contemporary accounts describe them as deeply spiritual individuals who spent years in training, mastering astronomical calculations and memorizing thousands of ritual procedures. They were the intellectuals of their society. Yet when faced with a choice between causing prolonged animal suffering or risking cosmic catastrophe, they chose the suffering without apparent hesitation. The theological framework was so totalizing, so absolute in its cosmic stakes, that individual suffering became a negligible variable. Modern extremist movements, religious, political, and ideological, often demonstrate similar patterns. When convinced that catastrophic consequences justify extraordinary actions, otherwise empathetic people can participate in horrific acts. The Aztec example provides a historical case study of how this process operates. Several new fields of study emerged directly from the Templo Mayor excavation: zoo archaeology ethics. An entire subdiscipline now exists to establish standards for excavating and interpreting animal remains. The International Council for Archaeozoology, founded in 1976, created specific protocols for handling evidence of animal suffering in archaeological contexts. These guidelines balance scientific documentation with ethical presentation. Theological sacrifice studies, comparative religion scholars developed frameworks for analyzing sacrificial practices across cultures, without defaulting to either uncritical relativism or moralistic condemnation. Dr. Wendy Donig. ER's 1985 work, The Ring of Truth in Sacrifice, established methodological approaches now taught in graduate programs worldwide. Acoustic archaeology. The discovery that the dog's death sounds could be heard across Tenochtitlan sparked interest in how ancient structures transmitted sound. Researchers have since studied acoustic properties of various Aztec and Maya temples, revealing sophisticated understanding of sound engineering. Some pyramids amplified specific frequencies, others created echo effects, and some, like the Templo Mayor, allowed sound to escape from internal chambers in ways that suggested intentional design. This last point raises disturbing possibilities. If the pyramids were designed to allow sounds from internal chambers to be heard externally, the architects might have anticipated ceremonies where living beings would be sealed inside. The acoustic properties weren't accidents, they were features. The Xoloitzcuintli discovery also changed how Mexico presents its pre-Columbian heritage to the world. For decades, official narratives emphasized the architectural, artistic, and scientific achievements of ancient civilizations, while minimizing or contextualizing the sacrificial elements. The philosophy was essentially, yes, they practiced sacrifice, but look at these pyramids. The 1949 discovery made that approach untenable. The sheer scale and horror of 1,500 dogs dying in sealed chambers couldn't be minimized. It demanded confrontation. Modern Mexican heritage sites now present more complex narratives. The Templo Mayor Museum, opened in 1987, includes extensive exhibits on sacrificial practices alongside displays of art and architecture. Educational materials explicitly acknowledge the violence inherent in Aztec religious life, while contextualizing it within their theological worldview. This approach has influenced how other nations present difficult heritage. Turkey's exhibits on the Armenian genocide, Germany's Holocaust memorials, and the United States slavery museums all reflect similar philosophy. Acknowledge the horror, provide context, but never excuse or minimize the suffering. Perhaps the most unexpected implication involves contemporary animal welfare law. The 1949 discovery occurred just as Western societies were beginning to develop modern animal cruelty statutes. Britain had passed its first animal protection laws in the 1820s, but comprehensive frameworks didn't emerge until the mid-20th century. Legal scholars studying historical precedents found the Aztec practices useful for establishing definitional boundaries. If a society genuinely believed that causing animal suffering served essential spiritual purposes, did that constitute cruelty? The consensus emerged that intent doesn't determine cruelty, suffering does. This principle now underlies most animal welfare legislation globally. The discovery also prompted several indigenous rights organizations to establish positions on pre-Columbian practices. These groups needed to navigate between honoring ancestral cultures and acknowledging practices that contradicted modern values. The resulting statements generally follow this framework. We honor the spiritual worldview of our ancestors while recognizing that some specific practices are incompatible with contemporary understanding of ethical treatment. In the broader study of human nature, the Templo Mayor dogs reveal how ordinary people can participate in extraordinary cruelty when three conditions align. First, a totalizing belief system that defines certain actions as cosmically necessary. Second, hierarchical authority structures that diffuse individual responsibility. Third, time pressure that eliminates space for moral reflection. These same three conditions appear in analyses of genocides, war crimes, and other mass atrocities. The Aztec case provides a pre-modern example of the pattern, suggesting it's not a feature of modernity, but a persistent aspect of human social psychology. Finally, the discovery changed how we think about historical empathy. For centuries, historians emphasized understanding past societies on their own terms, avoiding anachronistic moral judgments. The cultural relativism of mid-20th century anthropology pushed this further, suggesting we couldn't legitimately critique practices from other cultures. The dogs in those chambers challenged this framework. Yes, we can understand the theological necessity that motivated the priests. Yes, we can contextualize the practice within Aztec cosmology. But we can also acknowledge that 1,500 dogs died terrified and suffocating, and that this suffering was real regardless of the spiritual framework that justified it. Modern historical methodology now embraces what philosopher Martha Nussbaum calls engaged pluralism. We can understand different value systems while maintaining that some universal standards, like the wrongness of causing unnecessary suffering, transcend cultural context. The Templo Mayor excavation site receives approximately 500,000 visitors annually. Most spend time in the main galleries viewing jade masks, obsidian weapons, and stone carvings. Fewer venture to the smaller memorial section dedicated to Los Solos Olvidados, who do find a simple display. Several canine skeletons behind glass, an explanatory plaque in Spanish and English, and a guest book where visitors can leave comments. The comments reveal how people continue to wrestle with the discovery 75 years later. Some express sadness for the dogs, others defend Aztec religious practices. Many simply ask, how could they do this? The answer, unsatisfying as it may be, is that humans can justify almost anything when convinced the stakes are high enough. The Aztec priests believed they were saving the universe. The dog's suffering, however real, was infinitesimal compared to cosmic collapse. They were wrong, of course. The universe doesn't depend on blood offerings. The sun rises whether or not dogs resealed in pyramids. But they didn't know that. And that gap, between what they believed and what was true, created space for one of history's most disturbing mass entombments. Closing engagement, 60 seconds. What do you think motivated the priests to make such an impossible choice? Was it genuine theological conviction, or did political pressure play a role in sealing those chambers? Leave your theories in the comments below. I read every single one, and your perspectives from around the world always add depth to these historical mysteries. If this story affected you, you're not alone. The archaeologists who excavated Chamber 7 reported having nightmares for months afterward. One team member requested reassignment to a different project. The psychological weight of uncovering such suffering, even centuries old, reminds us that history isn't just dates and artifacts, it's the accumulated experience of billions of lives, human and animal, that came before us. Subscribe to Fierce Sermon for more lost chapters of history that challenge how we understand past civilizations. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Next week, we're exploring the Children's Crusade of 1212, a story even darker than most history books admit. And remember, the greatest horror isn't what ancient peoples did in darkness. It's recognizing the same capacity for justified cruelty still exists within us today, waiting for the right ideology, the right authority, and the right moment of pressure to emerge. Thank you for joining me on this journey into one of archaeology's most disturbing discoveries. I'll see you in the next video. Stay curious, stay critical, and never stop questioning the stories we tell ourselves about why suffering is necessary